Welcome to Wisdom Journey, the podcast where we explore the path of building an online business from the ground up. Here, I share my wins, struggles, lessons, and experiments so you can learn, adapt, and grow alongside me. I also interview experts in their respective field. Whether you're just starting out or looking for new strategies to scale, this is your space to find inspiration and practical wisdom. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I'm excited to take you on today's journey. Meet Derrick Van Mell, founder and principal of the Center for Management Terms and Practices, the international standards body for general management. Derrick is on a global mission to build a world community of caring, ethical, and competent leaders because, as he says, everyone deserves a boss who makes them feel safe, appreciated, and proud. He's worked with leaders around the world in every type of organization, authored multiple books, including Atoms and Orchestras, The Case for Standards-Based Management, and created 3 powerful one-page frameworks that redefine how management can be done with clarity, fairness, and compassion, from transforming chaotic workplaces into collaborative, purpose-driven teams to helping leaders see management as a calling. Their message is simple yet profound. When we raise the standard of ethics and competence, we don't just improve results, we help people thrive. Welcome to the podcast, Derrick.
Well, thank you, Wisdom. Great to join you.
Yeah, you said everyone deserves a boss who makes them feel safe, appreciated, and proud. I'm curious, how did that belief first take shape in your career?
Well, I started, my first job out of college. I started in a large project, a real estate project in Boston, Massachusetts, and the East Coast in the U.S. And I had some bosses that were not very good, and that's tough for someone who's just starting their career, and their head is full of their dreams and ambitions, and then to have bosses who are really too young for their jobs. That was really tough. But then after a couple of years, I got a new boss, and he was great. It was the complete opposite, and so my life changed, so dramatically, and it was so obvious because I had a boss who really cared about me as a person and helped me along, and solve problems together, and all the things that everybody really wants to have in a boss. And so that even at an early age, in my career, I really had that ambition to, first of all, be that kind of boss, that great kind of boss.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, as my career and life moved along, to help other people, learn how to do that and to provide some standards and framework, for being a great boss, because it matters so much.
Tell us about your experience with the bad bosses early on. I'm curious, how did those moments go?
Well, there's a couple different kinds of bad bosses, right? And I've had some bosses who did really bad things, and unfortunately, and one who wanted me to commit fraud for him. Others, were plainly dishonest. But there's another category of bad boss, which is people who aren't morally wrong or bad, but they just don't know how to be a boss,
Ooh.
right? And they don't know how to, they think that you're just a way to help them achieve what they want to achieve. And so, they don't communicate, they don't compliment you, they don't try to understand what you want to achieve, how you want to grow. And so you're just stuck, and that's very frustrating. But a good boss, puts other people first. And in a way, that's sort of the simplest definition or difference between a good boss and a bad boss. Leaving the real terrible people aside. A good boss puts other people first. A bad boss puts themselves first.
Wow, a good boss puts other people first. A bad boss puts themselves first. You founded the Center for Management Terms and Practices. What sparked the realizations that management needed universal standards?
Well, I was a general management consultant for a long time in helping people do strategic planning or working on large projects, those kinds of things. And I've been in lots of management meetings, a lot of them, and I just realized that even some people were not connecting or communicating, even around really basic terms. And it was one day I was in a group with 6 very experienced human resource leaders, really experienced people. And so I just asked, well, tell me what human resources is. Define that for me. And none of them could agree. And so I sort of kept experimenting with that. Where are the definitions of the most basic terms? What is marketing? Try to get 6 people in marketing to agree what is marketing, or what does the CFO do? And so, years went by. So I realized there was a need for a common sort of dictionary set of standard terminology, particularly when you're working globally. I'm working now with a global manufacturer. They have offices and facilities in different European countries, and of course, different European languages, and China as well. And so having literally have the same language matters. But then I was doing some work and helping teach at a business school here in the US, and working with the director of their executive programs, Mike, a great guy. And I said, Mike, I don't think people understand really, what does a manager do? What is a manager? What's the basic definition? Could you please send me that standard? Because I assumed that there was one. And he said there wasn't one. And that went a long way to explaining why it's hard to be, a lot of confusion about what the manager's job is, why people have inconsistent standards even within an organization. So I have an orderly mind, I think. And so I thought, well, there's standards in every other field of human knowledge, right? I don't know, wisdom if you're musical, but there's musical notation. That's a standard, right? And in the sciences, there's, the table of elements, on and on. But not in management. So I set out to do that.
Wow. And how has the journey been?
Well, it's been great, actually. I was just on a phone call this morning with a construction company, and they want to improve how their business is managed. They want to give their managers more skill. And so when I've learned how to pretty simply explain why I use standards. And because as builders, contractors, they use standards all the time, right? Everything in construction is standardized. So they understood that consistency. What do standards do? They provide consistency, quality, and trainability, right? You learn how to use the standards. The young people learn how to do it the way everybody else does it. And so everybody gets that. And so, one of a moment, I know you do a great job telling stories, and your other guests tell stories. And my story that told me I was on the right track. I was working with a medical foundation, people who raise money for hospitals. And these are people who had worked together for a very long time. In the same office, but they hadn't had the same language. They hadn't had the same structure. But once we started using that, one of the managers, leaned into the table. Literally, she just leaned across the table and said, "Now I see how what I do helps all you other guys." And that to me told me, okay, I'm on the right track.
Center for Management Terms and Practices, creating standards. I want us to step back a bit, right? In your own view, why are ethics and competence, the twin pillars of great leadership? Can one exist without the other?
Oh, that's a great question. No, they can't. At a very simple level, if a manager is not ethical, nobody's going to pay any attention to what they think. And they may be very competent, but if they're not competent, right, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to hurt people. That itself is not ethical. So the two really do, go together. And that's not a new idea with me, right? That's been an observation for, a couple thousand years, really.
Okay, because from most people's behavior, right, it's obvious that they see ethics as competence as completely different things. You see, I'll just explain a scenario to drive home what I'm talking about. Most people, they're good at they try to be good at what they're doing, but they make certain decisions that is not ethical. Does that make sense? Now, the way you just explained it now, it shows that at the end of the day, even though one seems to stand alone, they both connect back to each other when applied.
That's right. To be competent as a manager, to know, the disciplines of management and how people work together, what supervision means, having, the basic skills of decision-making and analysis and so forth, right? If people don't trust you, doesn't
Yeah,
matter, right? And
yeah.
that depends on their ethics.
For most persons, management, manager. I'm curious, what's the difference between manager, management, leader, leadership, lead? Because a lot of persons, when they hear management, that's a job title. It's a manager. Okay, I get it. It makes sense.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
that's one of my favorite questions, Wisdom. Thank you for asking me. And it's amazing, like I was saying, that there are the research is that businesses around the world spend the different estimates, 10 to 50 billion dollars a year on leadership development, right? Even if it's just 10 billion, you'd think then we would have tons of great managers all over the place, and
yeah.
nobody's ever told me that, right? So, and part of it is this fundamental question which you've just asked, which is great. So here's how we define that: a manager and leader, right? A manager is someone who helps people work together.
Yeah.
Very hard to do. A leader is someone who inspires people to accept a challenge. Here's the thing, though: those are not different people. A lot of confusion about that.
Okay.
Well, we're going to train leaders today and managers tomorrow. No, I mean, you can't help people work together unless you can inspire them to take up a challenge. It doesn't make any sense. And you can't expect people are going to take up a challenge unless you can help them work together to achieve it. So they go together. And then the word management, means the science of running an organization. And one of the things I've found really interesting, this was not my idea, but it's a thing that defines us as a species. I mean, it's one of the most fundamental things of being human is that we work together, at least to survive, if not, find happiness. That's, if we didn't work together, we wouldn't be here on the planet. And then the interesting thing, you're being in Nigeria, here I'm in the US, and, I'm sure you've had guests from all over the world.
Yeah.
The different titles adds to the confusion, right? We have, just in the United States alone, right? Someone who manages, helps people work together. Okay. They might have a title of supervisor, manager, director, executive, vice president, chief executive, and on and on. And those words are used differently in Europe at different levels. Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly confusing, and that's hard because that causes real problems. It causes people to be badly managed because the manager is maybe not clear on what really their role is. Yeah. So someday when I have an extra 100 hours, I'm going to try to standardize the titles in the world for management.
Wow, that would be fantastic.
But I seem to get too busy to do it.
There are bigger challenges.
Big challenges, right?
Yeah. You often describe management as a calling, right? And we are talking about management as a title, and now you say management is a calling. What does it mean? What does it look like for someone to treat management as a spiritual or moral vocation rather than just a job, a title, position?
Well, a calling to serve is to, as we said earlier, a real manager, a good boss, is someone who puts other people first.
Okay.
And they have faith in all that word means, that by caring for others, that they themselves will be happy. That's what makes them happy. And sometimes that's hard to see. It takes a long time. A story that reminds me of, and a good comparison, my aunt, who is 93 years old, she was a teacher in the Catholic school system in Chicago, Illinois, in the middle of the U.S. And she taught, young children, 10, 12-year-olds. And she's lived in the same neighborhood for 70 years, gone to the same grocery store. And she tells a story how after she retired, she'd go to the grocery store and someone would come up to her and say, "Oh, Mrs. Sweeney, now I want you to meet my son or my daughter. You were my teacher in 4th grade. And you meant, what you taught me meant so much. And I've talked about you all the time. I want you to meet my son or daughter."
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a deep reward for someone who has taken on a calling. Hers as an educator, but a manager is a kind of educator too. And another quick chapter to that story is lots of years go by, 30 years more. She still is going to that same grocery store. I now sometimes go to help her shop. Yeah. And people will come up to her and say, "Oh, Mrs. Sweeney, I want you to meet my granddaughter or my grandson because you were my teacher in 4th grade and what you taught me."
Hey, quick break. Before we continue, I'd love for you to join the Wisdom Journey newsletter. Every week, I share exclusive insights, tools, and behind-the-scenes updates to help you stay ahead in your own journey of building an online business. It's simple, practical, and built to help you grow. Sign up today for free at the link in the description. Now, let's get back to the episode.
He meant so much. And I had a teacher who just meant so much to me, who saw teaching as a calling. And when he passed away, 100 of his students came to his memorial. And I've heard stories about, good managers. I can think of one in particular. When I was launching my book, I had a book party like we all do. And this young woman talked about a boss she loved who had made a big difference in her life. And another woman I asked my guest, well, how many people do you think she's helped in her, while working with you? She said, oh, a couple hundred at least. And I said, well, where is she now? Well, this woman had been promoted to be head of human resources for a very large organization, one of the biggest in the US. So this woman who had taken up management as a calling and teaching management as a calling is probably helping tens of thousands of people. Indirectly, but still making a difference. And so even if among your listeners they've not had a good boss, I hope they have. But maybe they can remember a teacher or a coach from their school days in their sports, or a music conductor. Someone who put their students' needs first and found real joy and spiritual fulfillment in that. And that can be true for a manager.
What is the pledge of managerial power?
What is the pledge? So that's
the pledge of managerial power.
Yeah. So the pledge of managerial power is the standard of ethics. And this was also a lesson actually from my very first job where my bosses weren't that great. So I really gave a lot of thought to what is the code of behavior for a manager? Yeah. Now there's a separate field, a corporate ethics, and maybe you've talked about that in other shows, but that's about the corporation or the organization and the way they behave in the community, sustainability or charity or the kinds of things, and that's wonderful. But I'm talking about managerial ethics. What's the code of behavior for the manager themselves? And it really revolves around how they use their power. So my first job as manager, I was the file clerk on this big project I mentioned. And one day, the human resource director just shows up at the door and says, "Here, Derrick, here's your new assistant." I didn't know I was going to get an assistant. And she said, "Oh, you guys will get along," and off she went. And so I had an assistant. That was all I didn't get any training at all, but I became a manager. And even in that tiny experience, in my own, then my bosses, and all these years working with many different organizations of different sizes, a boss has so much power over their employees. I mean, not just hiring and firing and giving them raises, but just if they treat them badly by accident, they write a bad email by accident, or they ignore them without meaning to, that power that they have really can hurt that employee a lot. And so the pledge of managerial power is about sort of applying some very old ideas about how to manage yourself and the promises you should make and the organization can make about power. And I know that a lot of your audiences deal with life in the digital world.
Yeah.
But we all do. And so even if they're not a manager or they work by themselves, I was thinking about this as we were getting started or getting ready for our conversation, right? And tell me if I'm off track here, Wisdom.
Okay.
So, but even if some of your listeners are not themselves managers, they don't have a staff yet, or just one or two, they still have a lot of power with the information that they provide, right? And how they use that. If they're, we all trying to gain influence, right? That's how you get the word out. Sometimes that's just what you're selling. You're an influencer.
Yeah.
But sometimes, even if you're whatever your content you're creating, whether that's something, well established, you're a lawyer or an accountant, or you're doing something new, something artistic or music. We all have to use the digital world to get out there and shape people's opinion. And that's power. And we have to think about how we use that carefully. So are we aware of it? There's sort of four things, right? Are we aware of the power that we have? A lot of people don't stop to think about it, which is why podcasts like yours are so important. Then we have to introspect, how have I used my power? Have I used it for good, or have I neglected it, or have I hurt people by accident? And then, am I treating people as individuals? Is my use of power appropriate from person to person to person? And a great boss treats everybody as individuals, right? And then finally, you have to set an intention, right? Every day, I have this up on my shelf, right? How am I going to use my power and today to help people? And nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
But we can, set some rules for ourselves and hold ourselves to them. So the pledge, which is very simple, and by the way, free on our website. It's meant to be a public document.
Yeah.
And it's just a page. Is meant to help them.
While you were talking about the pledge of managerial power, you highlighted the ethics of information. I'm curious how that would look like for someone who controls information, can influence how people trust, collaborate, and fairness within organizations and groups, whether small or big.
Well, it's always been true, even before the digital age, that powerful people manipulated information, right?
Yeah.
They either withheld information. We've seen that happen in the U.S. now. They've provided false information. Just told lies with information, or they've provided the wrong context. They're not complete information, which is a way to, distort the truth. And so those are the same kinds of things, I think, that particularly as, in the digital age, everything we do is a kind of information. So we have to think hard about, right, is the information that I'm sharing, which I want, is it true? Nothing is perfect. We all make mistakes, but is it accurate? Is it complete? We have to think about that. What is my intention of sharing this information? Am I trying to be helpful?
Yeah.
How are people going to use this? And so again, it's a pretty broad topic to think about. How to use information ethically, right? Because again, some people just that's all they provide is information, right? News sources, or they're reporting on fashion or music or current events, whatever it is, or they run an organization and they're providing information about about the world. So again, there's ethics that apply to what we're saying, how we're saying it, how it's being used, and that's hard to do. We it's very hard. And I'd seen that in your material, and I have a simple story, if it's all right to share.
Okay.
This is just a sort of a simple, sort of down-to-earth business story about information. And it's not, anyway, I'll just tell the story. It's short. So I worked with a business, and they sell flooring products, carpets and tiles and that kind of thing. Very competitive business. And what's really important to them and their competitors is their service measurements, right? Do the orders we send, were they complete? Were we on time?
Yeah.
Right. And did we have on stock what customers needed? Okay. Simple measurements. And so what they did was they put those numbers on their homepage and compared to benchmarks. In other words, how other, what their goals were and what other people did. And their numbers were not fantastic. They're not bad, but they weren't.
Yeah.
Usually you think, well, people will share that kind of information when they want to brag about it, when it's extra good. But the CEO of this company was making a point to say, well, because sharing honest information is a way to build trust. And when you're in the when you're, like many of your listeners in the digital world, information equals honesty, trust equals success. And those things go together. So it's more important to be honest with the honesty is great for business. Even if your numbers even if you have to share some information that might not make you look so great, having a reputation for telling the truth, and being a reliable source of information, is not only ethical, and it keeps you in, it's a control for you, right?
Yeah.
and your whoever you work with. but it's a way to open dialogue, a trusting dialogue with your customer. So that's an interesting part of the ethics and opportunities, of sharing information. Does
Wow.
that make sense? Is that
Yeah, it does make sense. It does make sense. One part I'm curious about is, as leaders, um, how do we communicate as leaders, with influence but without manipulation? Because sometimes leaders just, I don't know if it's intentional or unintentional, but everything just gets mixed up, right? How do we know
Mhm.
that, okay, no, this is influence, you're communicating well, but this, no, this is, you're going to the other side.
So if I understand your questions right, so how do you know you're really communicating and you're communicating the right things? Is that
Yeah, how can leaders communicate with influence but without manipulation?
without manipulation, right? So,
Yeah,
um, well, first of all, it's hard to do, right?
okay.
Because we're human, we're proud of what we're doing. We've got lots of pressure on us to get more customers. Um, it's and we're proud of our work. So it's very easy with the best of intentions to not share the whole picture, right? To manipulate people inadvertently. I mean, there are some people who do it on purpose. That's a different kind of person. But so um, one thing, of course, is to have this a code of ethics about information, right? Again, are you aware of it? Are you thinking about it? Are you using it correctly? Are you checking? Um, but I think another important thing about good information is to watch what results, which means to listen to how people respond. And one of the amazing things about the digital age, we take this for granted now, but I'm a little bit older than you, maybe. So in the early days of the internet, right,
Uh,
we used to, the idea of letting people rate what you had to offer, 1 through 5 stars,
yeah,
and that people could do what they wanted and you couldn't control that. Well, a lot of people really struggled with that, right? That was like, oh my gosh, what could happen? And now we take it for granted. Everywhere we look, there's a rating
yeah,
that's generally objective. I mean, you can fiddle with it, you can game it a little bit, but generally those ratings are pretty reliable.
yeah,
And so having public review of your performance, the ratings and comments and so forth, that's great. But really, I think as a leader, someone who is really trying to inspire people to do something big, help them work together, I think the most important thing to do is go listen to them and take time to do that. And I remember a presentation I went to by the then chief executive officer of Harley Davidson, the motorcycle
yeah,
manufacturer, right? Famous world brand. And he spent, I think, a third of his time just out in the factories and in his facilities, just listening to his employees. And that's a way to know, one, that your message is coming across, and to learn whether they believe your message and they're inspired by your message. So you have to invest a lot as a leader to listen and make sure that you're getting feedback, and you have that combination both of confidence that a good leader has to have, but also the humility that says, oh, I got this wrong, or I
yeah,
didn't communicate it correctly, or I haven't provided the whole picture, so I've inadvertently distorted or manipulated people's opinion.
yeah. Yeah. Sometimes, one of the things I find really helpful is when I give instructions, I say certain things. I ask them like, "What exactly did I say? T- tell me what I said in your own words." And
Uh-huh.
then you hear them saying like, "Oh no, that's not what I said." No, no, it sounds the same, but that's not what I said. Like this is what I mean. Because sometimes you're like, "Oh yeah, it's pretty basic." Right? We have this. We sometimes we talk with so many assumptions, right? So like, "Oh yeah," I'm like, "Oh,
Mhm.
I went there yesterday," and you're like, "Where did you go to?" I'm like, like. Well, you're supposed to know where I went to. Like, I don't know where you're talking about, right? And
Right.
having them repeat what you said gets to really show you if what you they understand what you're saying, and if you're reaching out to them and they get what you mean completely.
Yeah. I
What?
think that's great advice, wisdom,
Yeah,
and I applaud you for doing that. And sometimes I think if all you do in a manager, or you're in at work, and if all you did all day is say, please tell me, what you mean by that,
yeah,
or your question, could tell me what you heard. If that's all you did, I think everything would work out just fine.
yeah, Yeah. One of the things that's I was super excited when you accepted the invitation to be on this podcast. Is one of the questions I was super excited to ask is right now many organizations suffer from meeting overload, especially with the remote work and every other thing, right? And
Hmm.
you said great managers run focused, inclusive, and short meetings. I'm curious, what would that look like, and what practical steps can help achieve that, so that we have meetings that actually count and not just waste everybody's time.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is everybody knows, everybody who runs a meeting, almost everybody, they know what they're supposed to do. They just don't do it. And so the first thing is to just be really clear. What are we trying to do in this meeting? Um, you know, uh, uh, so there's basically in business world or management in our work life, there's sort of two kinds of meetings. One is either we're here just to share information, present, have a question and answer, maybe just to share information, whatever that information might be. And the other kind of meeting is to make a decision. What are we going to do about this thing,
Okay.
right? So that's the first step. What's this meeting for? What kind of meeting is it? Second is, well, what exactly is it we're trying to do? What are we trying to convey, or what are we trying to decide? And I have been in, and I was telling some stories, earlier about
Yeah.
meetings that people get together and they don't really know what they're talking about. They may think they are, but they're talking about
Yeah.
the next person is, as you just said, right, about your own questions. So getting that statement of what we're trying to, the information we're trying to convey or the decision we're trying to make, get that crystal clear. That's not that easy to do because it's so, it's easy to write something down. It's harder to get that just right. But a little bit of effort will go a long way. And then the second thing that I think is really helpful if you're the manager, and again, a manager might be someone in a company with employees,
Yeah.
but it could also be again someone new to business, or they're starting up, they're a content creator,
Yeah.
and they might be with their other collaborators, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be employees. And um, one good thing to do we recommend is don't come up with three things you want to say. Come up with three great questions you want to ask, and then ask those questions. Write them down. Make sure they're really right, and then shut up. Right? Ask the questions and really listen. Uh, and one of it took me a long time to learn this, but I learned this from some great managers, is that if you get the questions just right, um, everybody will be clear on what to do. You don't actually have to literally answer them, write down the answers, 1, 2, 3. If you just get the questions just really, everybody says, yeah, those are the questions. That usually is enough to do the job. And then, of course, you do have to say, okay, what are the tasks and who's going to do them and follow up. So one of the clients I work with, their rule is if there's no agenda, you don't have to attend the meeting. And so people just walk out. And that's true whether you're a remote worker online, like we're doing now in the studio,
Yeah.
or you're in person. So there's no agenda, I don't have to be here. And just a way to force it. So again, this is a free resource at our website, theindex.net. There's a tool called the Quarter Page Meeting Planner, and it's a downloadable PDF, and it prompts you to write down these things. Is this meeting for, is it to convey information or to make a decision? What's the topic? What are three great questions? And then a place for the few notes. And frankly, if you're a manager and you have not had time to prepare for a meeting, you should not hold that meeting, because you're going to go backwards. You're going to waste people's time. They're going to get frustrated. You're going to lose momentum. And so, but once you get this discipline, one of my clients said, this approach has made all of our meetings at least 15 minutes shorter.
Oh,
And and some of the people I work with, right, they are 4 or 5 meetings a day or more, even sometimes. 15 minutes from each meeting, that's a lot.
yeah.
Uh,
I think
and it makes people feel good.
yeah, what the
Yeah.
approach does is that it gives people to do the upfront work regarding the meeting ahead of the meeting, right? If I know
Hmm.
what the meeting is about, and then I have some of the questions ahead, I can start coming up with my own ideas and write up. And so when we eventually get to the meeting, we're having this discussion. Everybody has something to say rather than so yeah. What's that? I don't know what I'm like. I'm just looking and I'm shaking my head. Very nice idea. Very nice idea. That's very great. That's very great. Because I have nothing
Yeah.
to say. Because I really you just dropped it on the table. I had no idea what we're even talking about.
Well, it's so important. Even if you're preparing the meeting, maybe you kind of know what the solution should be. Sometimes the point is not for you to figure it out. The point is for everybody to agree, right? And so
Yeah,
the
I'm talking
questions and
about
discussion,
the participants of the meeting, not the manager. So having an agenda ahead of time helps them to prepare for the meeting, so they can
right?
contribute to the meeting. You were pretty clear on the manager aspect. Ask the right questions and just shut up. Alright.
Yeah,
But that part is taken care of. I'm talking about, the participants of the meeting, because the reason why we're calling the meeting is because we want to pull heads together, right? That's why we're doing the meeting. The
right.
manager can just make the decision and move on, right? But calling the meeting because, okay, we want to rub minds together. And so for minds to be rubbed together, those minds need to be prepared so that everybody is contributing.
Yeah, and I take your point about it's great for the participants because people want to contribute and contribute in the right way. That makes you feel safe, appreciated, and proud. And I've learned that even if people get the agenda and the questions just 15 minutes before the meeting starts, um, that makes a world of difference for the meeting. I mean, better if it's a day ahead and they can maybe do some research or get the data, of course. But even just a little bit of time to just get those questions to, you work in their brains will let the participants just be that much, provide a lot more input, a lot better input, and be able to work with their colleagues that much better.
Yeah. What advice would you give to a young manager? And when I use the word manager, I use it as a loose concept because it could be, someone like me who is trying to grow a media company, or someone
Hmm.
who's a content creator, or someone who is a supervisor, in a restaurant. So I use the word manager in a loose concept, right? A young manager who's stepping into leadership for the first time, and in today's world where most workplaces are AI driven and most
Hmm.
of the times remote.
So, so your question,
What
what would be the
advice?
first things to think about?
What advice would you give to a young manager stepping into leadership for the first time in
Yeah.
today's fast-changing AI-driven workplace?
Yeah. I think that the most important thing, the first thing that they should do is to really know what the story is for what they're trying to do or the organization's trying to do. In other words, how is what we're doing, whether it's a restaurant or media company or whatever it is, how are we making the world a better place? I mean, what's the noble purpose of our work? And that can be
Well,
true. It doesn't have to be some grand, elaborate, revolutionary innovation. It doesn't have to be Elon Musk and rockets. Running a good restaurant, that's a great thing.
yeah,
And so to be really clear why this work we're doing together matters, because otherwise you can't inspire them. You can't really reach them as people. And to be able to explain that and bring your own passion and enthusiasm, your own energy, I think that's in a way the most important thing a young manager, any manager, but certainly a young manager can do instead of thinking about organizational tasks and all this kinds of stuff. If you can inspire people with your mission, you'll figure out you will work that will get people to work together to figure out how to do it. And so I think that's the number one thing is how does our work make a difference in the world? How are we helping people? Which is another way to think of management as a calling. And then the second thing uh, is to be sure to just spend time with each of your either employees or collaborators or partners and get to know them as a person,
yeah,
right? Spend time with them and yes, it takes time, and you're busy. When you're starting up, certainly, or you're in a small business, it seems like, oh, I don't have an hour to go chat with this person about their lives. I don't have time. Well, you're never going to learn what motivates them, what they're frightened about. You're never really going to connect with them at a human level until you invest that time. And to this point I made about Keith Wendell, the CEO of Harley, he spent all of that time listening, but that's also connecting. So
yeah,
make that human connection is the second thing. Have purpose and then connection. And then of course you need to have some skills.
yeah.
You need to know about decision making. You have to have the competency so people can, be successful, can, work, do the practical things so they can feel proud of what they've accomplished.
Thank you so much, Derek. I know, like, my perspective on leadership and management has changed for the better. And probably when I'm having conversation with my friends, they'll begin to see me as though I'm a management guru, not knowing that it was because I had a chat with you.
Well, that's nice of you to say, but
Yeah, you
I'm
you
trying to
did
help however I can.
you did mention a resource about the meeting. Would you be so kind to mention where we can get that resource again, and also where can
Sure.
listeners learn more about the work you do and also connect with you?
Yeah. So it's all on our website, which is the index, THEINDEX.net, not .com, .net. And from there, you can access the standards. There's it's all free. You need to subscribe with your email, but it's all free. There are the standards, again, standard of ethics. You talked about
Yeah,
the standard of competency, which is the Milwaukee model. And all this is explained on the website. And the index of terms and practices, which is a really useful tool for understanding what do these words mean, and also the structure of the knowledge of management. And there's a little video that explains all that. There's also a set of simple management tools, for planning and supervision and for meeting management. The quarter page meeting planner. That's at the top of the page called the toolkit. And of course, there's a contact us, which gets you to me. And if any of your listeners wants to chat,
yeah,
I'm happy to talk to anybody and help them. Management is, I don't know if this is the best way to close, but I think it's really important to say management is not easy. And management and leadership are not easy. Working with people who are under stress, you have this power, you're taking on a big challenge. It's not easy, but you can learn it, and it's worthwhile because, again, what could be better than knowing that you've helped a group of people, achieve something they never thought possible, right?
yeah. Wow.
That's a great way to spend one's life, I think.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for closing with a bang.
Very
Yeah,
good.
thank you so much. I'll put the link you mentioned in the description so listeners can click and go there to the site. It's been a pleasure
Great.
chatting with you, Derek.
Well, thank you, Wisdom.
Thanks for tuning into Wisdom Journey. I hope today's episode gave you practical steps and fresh ideas to keep moving forward. If you found value, be sure to subscribe and share this podcast with a fellow creator or entrepreneur who'd love to learn too. And don't forget to sign up for the newsletter and the link in the description for more resources, experiments, and lessons straight to your inbox. Until next time, keep building, keep learning, and keep walking your own wisdom journey. Yeah.